How can a writer sabotage themselves in a pitch meeting?
Well, I mean, again, let's start with the big ones. Taking notes badly, arguing, being defensive, one of the worst things that you can do. A whole bunch of things we can do with preparation that they omit doing. Not practicing enough for the pitch. We talk a lot about how techniques to practice. And then there's a whole bunch of things to know. I mean, we got, if I'm a psychologist for a minute, we got kind of anal about all the factors that influence what goes on, from something as big as some of those to like what time of the day you pitch and how you prepare for the time of day. There's research that says the earlier in the morning, the better. The later, the more you're screwed. There's a thing called decision fatigue, that people don't want to make decisions, especially important ones, as the day goes on. People start to lose glucose in the brain as the day goes on. We literally recommend, bring some lemonade or some chocolates with you, just to get their blood sugar up. The thing we talked about, eye contact. There's so many, I mean, we could spend the rest of the day easily talking about those. There's research that shows the effects of smiling.
Which you do so easily.
Gargantuan, I mean, some of the things are so subtle and so powerful. I mean, getting people to do this starts to influence how much you can influence them. Things you wouldn't, no, don't do that to me. Don't you do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you wouldn't think that would be such a big deal. And there's a whole bunch of stuff. We cite some interesting research on charisma.
Oh, like what? Sorry to interrupt.
There's a machine that's about the size of an iPhone that measures charisma. And you're probably wondering how. 3 factors they use. The first is speech. When a speaker is really boring, what's the word you use? Monotonous, monotone. So if you listen, linguists have a word, prosody, that talks to all the extra linguistic features of speech. So for example, monotone. Pitch is important. If you hear a really boring speaker, they stay in the same pitch the whole time, and it's a great way to put you to sleep, but after a while, oh my God. But a good speaker will go up or down as much as an octave. So I can't believe she did that to me. Let me tell you the most important thing about a great pitch. So all of a sudden I take it down, I get gravitas behind my words. Speed, again, you get faster as you get excited. You call more attention and add more weight as you slow down. When you were in the 7th grade, your English teacher worked on stress with you. Let's take this sentence and we're going to read it 6 times because there are 6 words. First time, put the stress on that word. Then the next word. Then oh, wow, listen how it changes when you do that. So all of those things start becoming factors. Next thing, gesturing. But again, if you watch people who really have a flair for communication, they're constantly gesturing, moving around. They get up, they scoot down. So that, and the third factor they looked at was mimicry. And there's a whole bunch of research on mirror neurons, and there's a whole expansive theory on the motor theory of speech perception. The idea that, let's say, for instance, you and I are talking, and we're both leaning back, and all of a sudden, we hit on a really exciting topic. And it's something that, I think with your background of interviewing And some of these variables I've been looking at, we could put a podcast together that would really get people into learning how to do exactly what we're talking about. And all of a sudden, both of us start to, I lean in, and because I see you lean in, and I don't make a big show of it, but all of a sudden we're both leaning in, and there's something way back here you're not recognizing, but we're kind of simpatico. We're both in this moment together. Stanford did a great study where they gave a persuasive speech on TV with an animated character. Condition 1, everybody saw the same thing. Condition 2 was an AI condition where the character was watching you, and every time you moved, it moved. And you did that, and it did that. And there was like a 30% difference in the persuadability with the mimicked condition. And out of like 70 students in this mimic condition, like 3 figured it out. And it was only because they did something weird. It's like, and they started playing. But most people had no idea that it was mimicking them, but way higher persuasion scores. And what was interesting was the first study they did to validate this. Again, this is the MIT Advanced Media Lab that did this. They got people to write business plans. And half of them were given as written plans, and the other half were presented orally to a group of businessmen. The ones that were written, no relation to the ones that were verbal, but the machine predicted the verbal ones as to which ones would be what the rankings were, just by those 3 variables. Then, Jeffrey, you may or may not know, had a fairly well-known play published called Speed Dating. They tried it with speed dating, and they were able to predict which people would exchange numbers.
Just curious, in terms of the hand gestures, I noticed some people, they point when they speak. Wouldn't that be considered hostile?
Well, it'd be considered, I think, rude.
Whoa. Pardon me. Ever watch Bill Clinton talk?
It's been a few years, but yeah. Okay, so you're, okay,
Watch.
Interesting.
Go on any Bill Clinton thing. He talks like this. He never does this.
Interesting.
He does this.
Right.
That's great.
I thought it was fascinating.
So he's almost pointing toward him, because some people I've noticed point toward themselves.
Well, he didn't. It's not pointing at himself as much as he wants to make the point, but he wants to make sure he's not doing this, because we have that association.
Smart.
That we know about you, and we don't like that, and you better not. But this.
I would say that there's an area of not having a successful pitch, which is more about not knowing what you do well and what you don't do well. We talk a lot about this in the book, that people should, we have examples of people bringing in an actor. Or there was one case where it was a wrestler, professional. No, it was judo. They were going to do a show
karate guy.
They were going to do a show on karate. So he brought the karate guy in to kind of juice up the meeting and get energy flow.
And in the middle, the pitch was going slowly, so the guy got down on the floor and started doing push-ups while he was talking.
Right. And I think the lesson there for any business is don't try to pretend that you know something you don't. Bring an expert with you. You can do all of that now. I mean, Peter mentioned earlier the people who will be in the meeting, and there's very little chance, I think, and of course, I can always be proven wrong. It happens about 25 times a day, that an unknown writer is going to go to a meeting, get that meeting, go in by themselves, unrecommended. I mean, I'm in communication with former students who are telling me how their careers are going, and LMU students are, because they're not entitled, like certain other schools, which I won't mention, they're well-liked because they're collaborators. You've got to be able to collaborate. That will kill a meeting.
The context this came up in a lot is having to do with ageism. And that if you know that the average person in the room is going to be 50 plus, and you're an early 20-something, then you may look for a mentor or somebody to go in with you. By the same token, you know that you're talking to a bunch of younger folks, you're talking to a bunch of Gen Zs, and you're ripened. You may want to think about bringing a youngster in there with you, or even not going and having them pitch what you're doing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And one of the things that's fascinating in the literature that's made the big difference is technology. That there's a dividing line where younger people think that if you're like 50 and above, you have no, somebody has to set your VCR up, and certainly, heaven forbid, Bluetooth, how do you do that? What's Bluetooth? And they just feel like, why not? This person has no idea of my world.
Right.
So,
hopefully that's changing too, because all of it is becoming easier to use. And much, like LMU went from a PC-based university to a completely Mac-based. We were always, everybody but the administration, the higher-ups, had Macs, but now they have Macs. So it's interesting. The world is changing.
Sure.
And I think in some ways, in business, any form of business, I think it's going to more and more, and what we hope is that it goes more and more towards storytelling and not giving me a bunch of data points. My favorite story about this, Peter dragged me early to, which I needed because I was going up for, at the time I was going up for associate professor. He dragged me to a conference of, what was the name of the organization? The Humor...
the International Humor
right.
Conference.
And I could hear my dad and his group of writer
They're
friends.
academics talking about humor.
My father saying, put knitting needles through my eyes. I'd rather do that than go. And we went, and there was this, that was the one in Boston where the poor guy
had a piece of paper in front of him that he read. I turn real humor in real United States.
I wouldn't put this in, David.
Oh my God. It was, and he had no idea how hysterical he was being. And after a while, you wanted to just get up there and either take the paper away or physically hurt him. And a matter of fact, if you had been to Vietnam and then were a samurai, and then were bitten by a fly that gave you the power to...
Well, 50 is the new 30. So a lot of people that are 50, they're Gen Xers, and they might know their way a little bit around a keyboard. But yeah, it's...
But younger people really look at older people,
right,
insultingly so.
Right. Well, we all did, yeah.
Yeah, that's nothing new.
Yeah.
I don't think that's new. I thought...
Well, what I'm saying, there's always been a young-old dichotomy, but technology has really crispened it.
Of course, if you're pitching to Alan Ball and you make fun of his inability with this is the other thing, is I think people really, and I don't know, I've never discussed this with Peter until today, but I think manners and respect, and I'm proud to say that the kids I work with have it. They know their history of the industry. They're interested in things. This generation that's coming out now are interested in many things, and they are respectful. I think you kill yourself the minute you walk into a room. You don't say please. You don't say thank you for taking the meeting with me. You don't do those simple, we would never call them intellectual things. They're just being a nice human being gets you really far. And especially if you're pitching to a big shot, somebody who doesn't need you, And I had that experience when I was a young person of kind of being in a meeting, being a little bit snotty. And I obviously didn't get the job because their attitude was, I don't need that. And that was a long time ago. I haven't been a young person for a while, but I have to say
it's been hours.
That I think that's, we do talk about it in the book. We talk about manners. We talk about dress. But all from a place of authenticity. The woman that I talked to who worked with Bonnie Hunt, not Bonnie Raitt, but Bonnie Hunt.
But both beautiful red hair.
Yeah, but she said, what I look for it's not the story. It's the person. It's like Peter was saying earlier, pitching yourself. If you're not authentic with me, I'm not going to do business with you. I'm just not. I don't care what you've got. I'm not going to do business with you. Another little tip that I just thought of, and this came from both business people and from show business people, is don't look, and this is sort of off what Peter was saying about that conference, don't be looking at you're only looking at it when you need it. Don't be looking into your notes while you're pitching and talking. Because again, it's a conversation. We're having a conversation today, even though it's an interview is a conversation, if it works, right? So yeah, that's a really good tip, I think. I wish I'd thought of it.
Sure. And I think when we're younger, we don't realize, maybe how we come off. And so it takes some knocks to know.
It's always good to have knocks. I
Right.
think that's where you learn.
Sure.
But, I'm the first thing I tell my students when they go into pitch, and they get a lot of practice before they graduate, and the grads get a lot more even, go in and have a conversation first. Don't, I said this earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Don't come in and go, here's what I've got for you today. If they say that, that's a completely different thing. They're in control of that meeting. It's their meeting. They called you. You're not a partner yet. And I think a lot of people still go in with that attitude of, I've got something no one's ever heard before. There is nothing no one's ever heard before. It doesn't exist.
Add to what Jeffrey's saying here.
It's okay with me. Sure.
The stage fright research says the first 2 minutes are by far the most scary time. That's when people's nerves are at absolute high.
Right.
Now, the problem is, if you're a performer, you can practice the hell out of those first 2 minutes and be really ready. Mm-hmm. But when you walk into a room, you don't know what your first 2 minutes is going to be like. Because they could say, all right, time is money, what you got? To, so what have you been doing lately? Well, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? And so one of the things that we advise people to do is practice 3 or 4 openings. So depending on what they ask you, if they're saying, tell us a little about yourself, they're asking for an elevator speech. Elevator speeches are really tricky because you can really sink yourself to prove how forgettable you are. Give them a bunch of statistics about your life. You got to think of a memorable story that says who you are through the story. If they're saying, what have you been working on? That says, give me a bigger picture of your professional life. What are your interests? What sort of projects are you doing? What different media are you working in? And all these things, you don't want to say, let's see now. You want to be able to jump in and talk. So you want to prepare. You still may not have the right opening, but it's better to have prepared 3 or 4 so you can grab onto something right away.
One thing I do see people do maybe on social media is they add kind of like, hey, yeah, cat lover, love coffee and chocolate, and bipolar. And I'm always surprised that's great that people, and nothing against mental illness, but I'm just saying, I'm surprised that we are so forward. Should we, and that's one's choice to
would
put
not
these
do
things.
that in a meeting.
Okay, that's where I was going with
I wouldn't do it in a meeting.
You should have your DSM-5R number.
I mean, first of all, forgetting how wrong that is on almost every level, that's way too personal a piece of information. And someone, I would say, why is this person telling me this? That's a big thing. It's just like, why would you tell me this? I don't want to know. And everybody self-diagnoses.
Well, that's what.
But there's another thing
you don't need
that's
this, David.
adjacent to what you're saying that would be good to toss in here, which is, particularly at the beginning of your pitch, to really work hard to avoid self-handicapping.
That's really important.
Well, I'm really nervous. I haven't done much of this, but here goes. Death. What people's mistaken idea is, I'll tell them I'm nervous, and then when I finish and I did okay, they'll say, oh, you didn't seem nervous at all. It was fine. And what you're doing is lowering the bar. No. The minute you say I'm nervous, what the person is going to do is say, okay, let me scan for signs of anxiety. Are the hands shaking? Do I hear a voice quaver? Are they blinking more? Are they kind of looking around and not making eye contact? And, if you say, well, I'm new and I'm not very good at this, they're not saying, oh, it's okay, I'm going to lower my expectations. They're saying, then why are you taking up my time? So you never want to start out with doing that. You go right in and do what you're doing. And one of the things, we did an interesting piece of research where every university student has to take a public speaking class. And it's a GE requirement. They like you to take it in the first year, so because you'll be talking in all your classes. This will get you ready. And most students wait till their senior year because they can't avoid it anymore if they want to graduate. And they hate that class. So we went in on the first day of a speech class and said, hi, we'd like to get your help in an experiment. So to relax you, we're going to ask each of you to get up and give a 2-minute extemporaneous talk. And to make it easier on you, we're going to videotape you. Those people could kill with their looks. But then we gave them a little questionnaire and we said, how nervous were you? And particularly, how nervous did the audience think you were? There's an interesting pair of concepts in social psychology called public and private self-consciousness. Public self-consciousness, the way you look to everybody. Private self-consciousness, the way you're feeling and what you're experiencing. People believe that they're the same. So in other words, if I'm really, really scared and I'm talking to you, I imagine, I'll work hard not to ruin the wires here, that you're seeing this. And so what we did was after they gave their talks and we recorded them, we brought each one in and had them look at their videos. Basically a waist shot. And their shirts and blouses and sweaters were perfectly still. They couldn't see any signs of anxiety. The body heat that was permeating their bodies did not come through the screen. You couldn't tell. We said, if you get really scared, don't hold a piece of paper because that'll amplify the shaking and they'll see it. But otherwise, they don't know, do they? And they were much calmer in their next talk, realizing the audience had no idea unless they said something about it. So, shh, you're scared? Never give it away.
So we're not in a new phase where it's actually encouraged. And I don't want to discourage anyone who puts things in their comments to us, because it is helpful. We've had people that say, I have this condition and, it's really helped me screenwriting, and I'm not here to...
It diverts the audience's attention to looking for that feature.
Interesting. Okay.
And I would just say...
if let's say, for instance, somebody was getting up to talk and they started with, I've been diagnosed as having Asperger's. You're immediately going to see, how do they connect? And it distracts you from their message because you're diagnosing them.
Okay.
Don't do that. It's a distraction.
It's a distraction. Yeah. Okay.
If they're telling you they're nervous, if they're telling you, well, I don't know much about the camera part of film. And so, I don't really understand how don't do that. Okay. Why do you need to say that?
Don't give information that nobody asked you for.
Not only that, but...
Right? No, seriously, it boils down to that. Don't offer information nobody asked you. They don't want to know.
Well, if it's interesting, you can put it in.
If it works...
But the point is, if it's negative, then you're sapping away their attention from what you want them to know.
Sure.
Putting it into an area you don't really feel good about and distracting them from hearing the message. And one of the things we talk a lot about is we can't multitask worth a damn. So you're splitting somebody's attention. And the more you're looking at me and diagnosing what my situation is, the less you're hearing my message.
Okay, interesting. So don't go in and say, hi, I'm Mary Ann, 42, on my third marriage, and I hope this one works out.
Nope.
Oh. Yeah, well, let's see what's wrong with her. Maybe we can diagnose and tell her.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Won't do that.
No, I'm poison. Unless if you're saying, you know, hi, my name is Diane, I'm on my third marriage, and my screenplay is really what to do when you have multiple marriages and you want to go to Paris to look for your next husband.
Ah, okay.
So if you
That's
can
good.
work in whatever it is, you know, if you have cerebral palsy and you are writing something that has to do with cerebral palsy, cool, put it in. But don't put it in if it doesn't work.
Okay. Okay. Good
I
to know.
mean, it's interesting that I had a friend in graduate school who happened to have cerebral palsy. And he said, you know, I'm not happy about having cerebral palsy, but I've learned to use it. Like all during school, if I didn't want to do my math homework, I wouldn't do it. The teacher would start to yell at me. I would shake a little more than I had to, and stammer a little more than I had to, and shake a little more than I had to, until the teacher said, "It's okay, Bobby, it's okay, don't do it." So I used it to the max. If I got it, I'm gonna, play.